Hello and welcome to episode 441 of Retro Encounter, RPG-Fan's weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi. And listeners, I don't know when you're listening to this podcast. It could be technically any date in the after posting. But Halloween is a Thursday this year, and that's exactly when this episode is going up. So as sort of a happy Halloween to all of Retro Encounters listeners, we're going to have a light-hearted, spooky show and tell episode of Retro Encounter. But who's joining me for this episode? They are Dom Kemp.
Hello, hello.
Audra Bowling.
Hiya.
And Lucy Gray. I knew you were going to try and pull some nonsense, Lucy, so I asked you last. I knew it. I just knew it. But Lucy, Audra, Dom, we are going to celebrate Halloween with just a discussion of things that creep us out, give us those, good feeling scares in an RPG. Because while RPGFan does not cover a lot of horror, I mean, there's reviews of horror adventure games here and there, so I don't want to completely alienate the genre. This podcast is about RPGs and adventure games, so without totally stepping into a Silent Hill or a Resident Evil zone, I want to talk about what we think are the scariest parts of some of our favorite RPGs. I say some of our favorites, even though both of the games that I'm bringing are ones I have not finished. Maybe that's jumping the gun a little bit. Before we really kick it off, I want to ask you each a question. How much do you like getting scared? And maybe what's something that scares you? You go first, Audra.
I do not like getting scared usually, so I tend to avoid it if I can, but I have played like Resident Evil and I've watched a few scary movies here and there, and a few horror manga. Probably my favorite one at the moment is The Summer Hikaru Died, which is like a very psychological, supernatural mystery horror manga. And it has a really good mystery and characters in it, so. But yeah, normally I tend to avoid it.
That's interesting, but
Yeah.
I mean, you did sign up for this episode, so when something scary shows up in a video game, do you generally find it exciting, or do you have to put the thing down for a couple days?
I genuinely find it exciting usually. And I can actually stomach playing through it as opposed to like a friend of mine who will hand me the controller at certain points. Yeah. So
when I was much younger, I think I was that person that handed the controller off. I'll go next in this query that I posited. I don't seek out horror experiences a lot. I sort of get very, very locked into whatever I'm watching or playing, and sometimes and jump scares will sometimes have me literally jump even in a movie theater. So I don't seek out a lot of horror games or television or film, because when I was much younger, I was genuinely frightened by it. And even like when I played Until Dawn for the first time just a couple of years ago, that's like a 10-hour game that took me a month to play because I had to do it in short bursts to settle myself down a little bit. But I don't play a lot of horror games. I've never finished a Resident Evil game or a Silent Hill game. Like Until Dawn is, if anything, the exception and not the rule. But if something is really scary or grotesque in a genre or a game that I'm not expecting it necessarily, then like Audra, I'll usually find it exciting and not totally off-putting. But I don't seek out a lot of horror experiences, but I'm not against a little bit of scares here and there in media that I enjoy. And I mean, I just have vivid memories as a child of things like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and maybe certain scenes from The Dark Crystal or Labyrinth that just scared me so much as a kid that it had me avoid horror even well into adulthood. But Dom, you next. What kind of horror experiences do you seek out, if any, and how do you like your horror in games?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm much the same as you guys when I was younger. I really did avoid a lot of horror. It really scared me. I remember Coraline being almost like a childhood trauma of sorts when I watched it with my sisters. But like I've recently really come around to enjoying horror. I kind of enjoy the thrill and like the adrenaline rush it gives you, and especially the types of horror that isn't just jump scares, but the ones that really make a point to just build tension nonstop and sometimes not even like have like a proper like climax for you to release that tension. I really have come to enjoy like that kind of horror in movies and stuff. So recently I've enjoyed so like movies like Hereditary and like Midsommar really like turned my perspective on horror. And I think I don't really actively seek it, but I'm definitely not against it anymore as much as I was.
Oh, so you're in a similar position to Audra and I. We're all recovering scaredy cats.
Yeah. For
All right.
sure.
Curious if this answer is going to be much different from the previous three. Lucy, how much do you enjoy horror, and what kind of horror experiences do you seek out?
Now, I'm much sort of like you guys. I honestly don't seek out horror. That being said, in high school, what my favorite movie was Army of Darkness and the Evil Dead trilogy. I have to admit, schlock horror has always had a place in my heart. But I can't say that I haven't liked horror because in looking at my preference history, I have a sort of love for not jump scare horror that I can't deal with, but with more almost metaphysical horror, stories like Mononoke, that series, and where it's almost historical horror, and um, Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service, really great manga. It's not a jump scare manga, but it's a little bit of body horror, really interesting weaving of historical mythology and horror all together. And that's something that I don't actively seek out, but at the same time, I do find myself enjoying more often than not.
All right, so yeah, I guess all of us enjoy horror more now as adults than we did as children. And I mean, when I think of my favorite horror movies, they're almost all recent ones because I went in with the right mindset. Like, I mean, I think that Cabin in the Woods and Get Out are genius works, but that's because those are horror films with something to say, and and like comedy and metaphor in addition to just just trying to affect an audience with horror or scares. But I think we're ready to move on to the bulk of the episode. This is a show and tell episode, so each of us has two games or scenarios or series that we want to talk about a little bit, especially the scary elements within each. And I just mentioned a very short time ago that I enjoy horror as metaphor. So I'm going to go first and talk about an extremely recent game that came out around 3 weeks ago. Metaphor Fantasio. I'm in the middle of playing that game right now. It's we're recording this over a week before the 31st, but I'm enjoying the hell out of it. I'm probably around halfway through, something like 40 hours in, and I want to talk about one of this game's primary enemies. And they've been in. So if you want to avoid all metaphor spoilers, you should skip ahead 5 minutes. But some of the enemies in metaphor are grotesque monsters called humans with a capital H. The main characters in metaphor come from 8 or 9 different tribes of sort of demi-humans. There's one race has small horns, one race has sort of elf-like ears, one race has sort of jewel color eyes and hair. So none of them are completely of a human appearance, except for the main character, but that's the whole thing. And the word human in this game means these terrifying monstrosities that leave destruction in their wake wherever they go. And there's actually a painting called The Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch. And some of the human designs in this game are directly lifted from that painting, including there's a twisted human face that's on top of an egg with a sort of carousel of weird animals going around a plate on its head, which is and that is almost element for element one of the earliest bosses in the game. One kind of recurring human is a sort of like is birds with human faces, which are also on that painting. Some sort of like walking eggs with knight armor on, which is also in that painting. So like it's like a twisted vision of humanity from the Hell third of the Garden of Earthly Delights painting is the primary inspiration for these humans. And every time there's a new one, let me tell you, it's gross, it's weird, it's unsettling. I cannot take my eyes off of it. They affect me a big deal. But the worst one is the main enemy of the second dungeon. And that's what I want to focus on here. I don't know. Has anyone here played Metaphor yet? Because it's brand new. It's possible I'm the only one that's touched it.
Not
I,
yet.
not
I have
yet, but
not.
now that you've
No.
mentioned Harmonious Bosch, I want to because I want to see if they have an ass player.
Oh, Lucy. You should play this video game. That's all I'm gonna say. But I believe this human is not in that painting specifically. Maybe it's in another Bosch painting or it's in another specific art reference that I'm not picking up on. That's possible. But there's one human that's again mostly in the big second dungeon that is appears to be a giant baby doll with a glowing pacifier and glowing red eyes that stalks you, and you have to sort of avoid it in stealth segments. And it's believed to be like a like serial murdering the denizens of this one town. And so that's scary. I find the Calbrena dolls scary in FF4 for and oh man, the dollhouse episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark gave me nightmares as a child. So like doll and baby horror stuff frightens me already a little bit, and no, I will not ever play Resident Evil 8 no matter how much you pay me. But this one just ratchets it up so much. It is a when you end up finally confronting the giant baby human and fighting it as a boss, it takes its pacifier off, and its mouth is like a wide open cosmic horror maw of teeth and drool. That's just
Ooh.
it's like baby laughing and screaming sounds at the same time. And oh man, and you have to like attack its eyes in battle, because if its eyes stay open, it will get extra turns to stun you or daze you on its turns, to and then it'll like use, I think it uses like drool attacks to lower your defense, and then a bunch of heavy physical attacks. it, it, I am already inside, like, oh boy, how do I put this? I'm already uh like mildly afraid of dolls and babies in horror, and they just gave me an absolute terror of one in like the second large area of Metaphora Fantasio, and it has freaked me out and haunted me for the full week since I defeated it. So I hope that makes you more and not less interested in Metaphora Fantasio, because I think it's one of the best games I've played all year. But yeah, Renaissance art inspired grotesque humans as a certain kind of boss fight, and but a really strong RPG top front to back. I can't 100% confirm this, but I'm having so much fun with it that I think I want to do a spoiler cast episode on it later this year. But we'll see how that goes. Yeah,
Ooh.
it's like I'm probably halfway through, and I'm like, yeah, I need to talk about this game on a podcast a lot. So maybe that'll happen later. But yeah, that was a lot of talking at once. Are any of you afraid of dolls and babies in horror as much as I am?
I have to say, I wasn't originally, but my background as a former museum educator, I got introduced to the work of Henry Darger, who drew these absolutely fantastical drawings, which were all based on children's advertising from the 1940s and 50s. And that gave me nightmares for quite a while. And so it is now a good sticking point for me.
Yeah,
Yeah. Babies
I've
and
read
dolls are
some.
scary enough in real
Yeah,
life as is.
yeah. I read a really scary ghost story about dolls, possessed dolls, and that. Yeah, I can see that.
Man, it's a funny comedy song, but the song "Creepy Doll" by Jonathan Colton even sets me on edge a little bit. Just thinking about that scenario, I don't care for it. But again, like I said, when I was much younger, the Calbrena dolls from Final Fantasy IV scared me, and that game has a little bit of body horror in it, but not at the level of the games we're talking about today. But we do have one Final Fantasy game on the list, and Audra, this is not a game I've played. It's the only Final Fantasy main series game I haven't played. But feel free to spoil away. We're going to talk about Final Fantasy 15 a little bit. And what you have here is you said that chapter 13 has some horror elements that set you off.
Yes, it's very similar in a way to. It's kind of like an homage to, I think, survival horror games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill. There's basically the entire chapter 13, the original version. I know they've like updated it since and kind of made it a little easier to get through. And I think they even added a part where you can play as Ignis and Gladiolus. But the original part is you're controlling Noctis by himself in this capital city of Gralia for the empire, the evil empire, basically, of the game. And it's pretty much gone to heck in a handbasket, and there's nothing but like demons and monsters everywhere, and you kind of have to sneak past a lot of them because you only have a limited ability inventory as Noctis at this point, and it's very unsettling, the atmosphere. They have some jump scares at times, like things will jump out of the lockers at you, and some of the demons actually have some pretty scary designs mixed in with the fact that you're fighting them through like in dark areas that don't have a lot of lighting. And it's just overall, it was not, it's very memorable, especially compared to the rest of the game, and it kind of sets the stage for the later parts of the story.
Oof, memorable compared to the rest of the game. I wonder that sounds like a dig at Final Fantasy 15.
Oh no, I actually really like Final Fantasy 15, but it's just
It's
it's
memorably
very
different
different.
from the rest.
Yes,
Yeah, I got it.
and it kind of sets the stage for when they do a time skip later on at the end of the Gralia chapters, and so it kind of just has a different feel from like the open world exploration that you had in the beginning stages, which is more light. And yeah, it was interesting. It was definitely, I felt like maybe they were homaging a survival horror esque feel to it.
Well, that's interesting. Lucy or Dom, have either of you played Final Fantasy 15 and can vouch for Audra's scene here?
No, she's definitely right. It definitely has these aspects of survival horror because you have a limited inventory. You're by yourself. You don't have any backup, and there are significant jump scares.
Yep.
Yeah. I have not played, but this is definitely making me interested in picking the game up.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely, I do know that they have patched it a little bit to make it, I think there are some complaints about the difficulty of it comparatively. So they've kind of made some easier routes to go on for it. But yeah, the original, I didn't have a problem beating it, but it was just definitely a very different, kind of more horror, unsettling experience.
Well, all right. I guess maybe now I need to finally cross that one off eventually. Maybe I can play it for Halloween and get that scene right in time for the night itself. But
It's a fun
well,
game. Definitely.
yeah, I've heard so many mixed things about it, and but a lot of RPG fan people really do like Final Fantasy 15, and so I'm edging closer to playing it. The problem is just that I'm in no danger of running out of games to play,
Yeah.
so it's hard to even estimate how far up or down the pile it is. But let's continue this trend of talking about games I haven't played. Um, Lucy, the only Shadow Hearts game I've played is the second one, and Shadow Hearts Covenant is a masterpiece. That game's incredible. But are you telling me that the first one might have even more grotesque body horror in its enemy designs than the second?
Yeah, in fact, actually, it's a common complaint about the second game is that they actually toned down some of the body horror
Oh
in the
yikes!
game.
Because there's already a non-trivial amount.
No, and when I say that, I do like some horror, Shadow Hearts happens to be one of my favorite games of all time, and There is no lacking in body horror in this game. And but I'm going to be talking about the end game of Shadow Hearts, so spoilers be warned. Uh Particularly the reason that this is so horrifying at the end of the game is unless you've done a secret element to make sure that you can survive this enemy, which is basically a mask of unblinking and blinking eyes surrounding you, like they make up the ceiling, the floor, everything in one of their major attacks. You can't survive it, and you're playing as one as basically by yourself as one of the weakest characters in the game, and you are stuck trying in vain to beat this enemy. And you, unless you've done this thing that is not an obvious idea, you will die, and you're left with this character who knows that they are going to die. And just the absolute body horror throughout this game is just compounded by this fact that you can't win this, and the fact that you have to die in order to continue this very non-standard not good ending. But that's another hallmark of the Shadow Hearts series, is that more often than not the bad ending is the canon ending.
Like the game's mechanics put you in a hopeless situation so that you feel the despair in the video game mechanics and not just in the visual or audio choice.
Yes. um
Oh, that's awful. Oh man. That's
and
almost turned off the game bad for me.
I mean it, but in the same way it actually makes sense, because then you understand why they've now come out that the order is that the bad ending of Shadow Hearts um comes first, then the second game, and then the good ending of the original Shadow Hearts is actually the finale of that set of characters.
Yes, I had that explained to me when I was doing Shadow Hearts 2 Covenant podcasts. The bad ending in Shadow Hearts 1 is canon, but then the events of Shadow Hearts 2 make the good ending of Shadow Hearts 1 canon.
Yes.
And
And
I mean, I haven't played the first game, but the second game pulls it off in a way that makes it pretty satisfying.
it is. And but at the same time, the original game didn't explain that to you. And so there are these multiple instances where you're just dealing with unwinnable after unwinnable situations. And combined with the body horror and this general feeling like there is no way you're actually gonna win because you're fighting against God, uh, with these horrible body horror monsters, you're just like, okay, I'm getting a feeling this game wants me to feel sad.
Oh man, when the game's so good, like even when it's forcing you into like a negative headspace, you still appreciate that how it's doing it.
That is a good game.
Dom, do you have any Shadow Hearts experience? Because if you don't, then maybe you can play some and then listen to 4 episodes of Retro Encounter about them.
No, it's actually, yeah, I actually haven't, but man, this sounds like really cool stuff. I wonder if it's on Steam.
Unfortunately, Shadow Hearts is in what's called licensing hell.
Yeah,
Oh
it was made by
no.
Sacknoth and then published in by different publishers in different territories. I don't even know who holds the rights to it. It's sort of a notoriously hard to play game unless you have the discs and a PlayStation 2 for them. And that might even go double for its PS1 predecessor, Kudelka.
You
Uh,
Kudelka even more so.
yeah, because that's an expensive rare game as well.
It is.
But yeah, like those games are sort of notoriously hard to get a hold of. And while I know that a collection of some kind would be really welcome and exciting, I haven't even heard a sniff of news of something like that ever happening. But if they ever announced a Shadow Hearts trilogy collection, even though I own discs of all 3 games, I would buy it in half a second just so I can play them on a PS5 or a Switch.
Same here. But I will say that the one of the original creators, uh, uh, s- when we interviewed him, actually said he wasn't even sure who owned the rights.
Was it Kikuta or someone else?
I think it was Kikuta.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, yeah. Maybe listeners didn't. Listeners, in case you did not know this, the music composer for the first three games in the Mana series also co-founded Sagnoth and co-created Shadow Hearts. But anyway, let's move on to something entirely different. Dom, you have one game I have played many times on your list, and one game that I really want to play soon. So, which one are you more interested in talking about right now?
I could start with Mass Effect 2, a little bit less body horror, but similarly as grim, I think.
I mean,
Yeah.
when you from your blurb here, I know this moment extraordinarily well, and it definitely fits in this episode. I don't know if you've played Mass Effect Lucy, but I know Audra has. So yeah, this is a scenario that as soon as I learned about it, I did everything in my power to avoid it. So let's talk about maybe the most harrowing moment in Mass Effect 2. Listeners, spoilers for the ending of a 2010-2011 video game.
True. This is very big spoilers, but yeah. Basically, towards the end of Mass Effect 2, you get told that you have to traverse the Omega 4 relay to enter the collector base or to deal with the collectors, but you're not forced to go immediately. So you do have the option of, clearing out your side quest log before doing that, which I did on my first playthrough. And everything is hunky dory if you've upgraded your ship well and stuff. And getting to the base itself is fine, but there comes a point. So before this, collectors have actually intercepted your ship beforehand and abducted all your crewmates. And there comes a point when you infiltrate the collector ship that you then get the opportunity to save your crewmates. But if you're like me and did cleared all of your side quest log before going there, you will find that everyone but Dr. Chakwas has been turned into bio soup to be pumped into making the human reaper on the ship. And that was a really shocking moment because I never expected. I mean, I guess they did kill off Shepard in the opening of Mass Effect 2. So like the stakes were, it wasn't like completely out of the blue, but these are crewmates you've been with for the past like what 20 to 30 hours you've been playing the game, and then for them to just be gone like that, I thought that was like a really shocking and really, it turned like Mass Effect 2 into like a really grim story for me at this point. So the collectors have been terrorizing human colonies up to this point, but like for them to turn all of your very personal and close crewmates into just genetic sludge was wow. That was like a wowza moment for me. And yeah, like Sollosi said, the moment I figured this part out, I made sure in my next playthrough that the moment this mission came up, this was priority one. I didn't care about anything else. So yeah, that was a that was a real shocking moment for me, and an otherwise kind of sort of a not lighthearted, but more like a very action focused game to this point.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about this is that Mass Effect 2 does have some like snippets of horror throughout. Like there's enemies
Hmm.
called husks that are basically just like lifeless shells that were once humans or aliens and pursue you like zombies, and they can be quite hard to take down. And there's moments where you're being swarmed or surrounded in a in a dark abandoned spaceship that will bring to mind movies like Aliens or Starship Troopers, which are scary in their own way. But the way they set up this moment is, that these collectors are a mysterious alien race that are abducting humans. They appear to be under the control of Reapers, which are giant apocalypse sentient aliens that are the size of spaceships. At the end, the Mass Effect 1 ends in you sort of defeating and destroying a Reaper that's trying to summon a horde of Reapers, and Mass Effect 2 is trying to prepare the galaxy for the Reaper invasion. But the way they set this up is, you know that humans are being abducted, you know that collectors are up to something, you believe they're connected to reapers, but you're not really sure. But then it ends with I think it's the I forget what the name of the mission is, but it's the is it called the AFI
Well,
or
the Reaper the IFF, where you have
IFF? That's it.
to,
Yeah, that's it.
yeah,
The AFI is an indie rock band. I'm sorry.
yeah.
Right. The IFF mission, I think after that one happens, you get the story thing where everyone on on the Normandy on your ship, except for your sort of fighting party, gets abducted. So even like I don't know if you were that clear about it, Dom. It's everyone that's on the ship besides like Joker and your sort of fighting party members. So
Mhm, mhm.
you get those 10 or so people no matter what. But then they time you by like how many quests you complete and how many like galaxy jumps you make in between the IFF and the Omega 4. And if that number is above a certain amount, then you arrive too late and your entire crew gets wiped out, and you see them liquefied in front of you. Um,
Ugh.
and if you do like if you wait a little bit but not soon enough, then roughly half of the crew survives. But you do see like your ensign die in front of you. But if you only do like one mission and then immediately go to the Omega 4, then you can save everybody. And so it's a weird like timed condition for an RPG that gives you an option for a best possible outcome, which is of course what I'm going to try and get every time. But the consequences of not going for that are quite grim, and Dom were probably a shock to you the first time you played it.
Oh yeah. And I think what really made this moment last so long is that despite being so shocking, I feel like the groundwork for this moment was like really sufficiently built throughout the game's narrative to this point, so that even in hindsight, or like after playing the game again, it doesn't feel like it's just there for like cheap shock value. Like the collectors have been doing this throughout the entire game.
Yeah,
And then
there's
yeah.
foreshadowing, and there's hinting as what's going on, so that it doesn't feel like an unfair twist. It's just a
Mhm.
you just get the horror of realization of what's been going on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's yeah. Honestly, Mass Effect 2 otherwise I think is a fairly just like action-packed game, but yeah, this moment was, oh my god. This turned really dark all of a sudden.
Yeah, Mass Effect 2 is awesome, and it's very character driven. It has
Mhm.
a lot of sort of high concept science fiction in it, and some sort of lowbrow action movie moments in it that are it's just an absolute thrill ride the entire way through. I love Mass Effect 2, but
Mhm.
if your timing is wrong in this one part of the game, it turns into an absolute bloodbath.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, Lucy, if you ever play that game, and you see the Reaper IFF mission, do every side quest before going on to that. Before
Yes.
going after the IFF, that's the one advice every Mass Effect 2 player should know. Do every side quest you want to before the IFF.
Uh-huh.
Well, thank you for that interlude, Dom. And I hate that I'm using this transition, but speaking of people being liquefied right in front of you, um,
Oh no.
let's talk about a PlayStation horror RPG classic. Parasite Eve is a Square game from like right in the middle of their PlayStation peak. I think those two games were something like 98 and 2000, maybe 99. And the first one has more RPG elements, and the second one has more survival horror elements. But I've only played the first one, and I only got like three-quarters of the way through. It's not even a very long game, but I just it was so unsettling to me that I stopped playing it, even though I think I got near the end of the game. But I hope I'm not misrepresenting the story of this too much. But it's based on a Japanese horror science fiction novel from quite a bit earlier, and basically it's a a sentient strain of human mitochondria. Yes, the powerhouse of the cell for all of you that were educated in North America, where the mitochondria goes berserk and causes humans to spontaneously mutate. And the living strain of mitochondria that's behind all of this is codenamed Eve. And Eve takes over a human singer whose name is, oh, I think it's I think her name is Pierce, Melissa Pierce. Yeah. So there's a popular singer named Melissa Pierce who, through mysterious circumstances, becomes sort of possessed by by this like evil cellular horror monster, and that gives Melissa Pierce, who's mostly called Eve throughout the game, this gives Eve the ability to um, have humans or animals or any biomass spontaneously mutate into a horror creature around her. So throughout the game, you fight like a horrible mutated rat, horrible mutated alligators, and there's scenes of Eve just going through crowds and making um, like spikes and tentacles and fire spontaneously jump out of everywhere. And one scene near the end of the game that I don't even think I reached. I think I only saw this in YouTube later. Has Melissa Pierce host a concert where she transforms into Eve on stage and then causes everyone in the audience to spontaneously melt. And then Jill Valentine, the main character, who's a police officer trying to stop Eve, has to sort of like gingerly walk through the sludge to challenge her to to another fight. And I don't think that's the end of the game, but that's around where I stopped playing. And like every new scene in Parasite Eve is just a new horror setting. It's like here's the zoo, here's the hospital, here's every they even make New York Central Park pretty terrifying. But because the villain, it will just creates, I know we've said body horror like 30 times this episode, because the villain just creates body horror extravaganzas by just by being close enough to her. it I was just on edge every time I played that game, and not just because sometimes the combat was confusing. It's just like I'm sort of glad that game's never been remade in HD, because I don't think I could handle it. It's like the Ark of the Covenant scene in Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark being able to happen at like between every dungeon. Just fire and ooze and flesh, and oh man, I don't do well with horror, and that's why I haven't finished that game, even though I first tried to play it well over 20 years ago.
I do know that that game is a horror for another member of our staff for a completely different reason. That's being that she used to work in a genetics lab, and every time we talk about the game, she'd immediately go, "Genes don't work that way."
Correct. Mitochondria do not become haunted and sentient monsters. They are the powerhouse of the cell, as we all know.
Yes.
But I mean, I'm sure that some elementary or middle school students that played this at exactly the wrong time had some very interesting questions for their science teachers back in '99 or whenever this came out. But I mean, has anyone else here played Parasite Eve and have as many vaguely terrifying memories of it as I do?
I watched somebody play it. I didn't play it myself, and it did give me nightmares.
I think I tried playing it and I didn't get very far in it. Probably just like one of the beginning stages.
Yeah, I think I've only read about the everybody spontaneously combusting scene, but damn, to hear it again here, it does sound quite visceral.
There's spontaneous combusting and just liquefying, including
Yeah.
like it happens to a pilot of a helicopter that you're on, and then causes the helicopter to crash. And I don't know. It's all so stressful and so disgusting that it's definitely many people's type. And we even did an episode on Parasite Eve, or maybe a couple episodes, many years ago on the podcast. Oh my god, it might have been 8 or 9 years ago. I was not on those episodes, but yeah, Parasite Eve, horror RPG classic. Just don't ask me to play it. But Audra, the other game that you brought it over here on your list here is a game I did play for the podcast for the first time several years ago. I think it was 2018, and I think is maybe one of my favorite PlayStation games by now. So, do you want to talk about your next horror scene?
Oh yes, it is Suikoden 2, and it is the Luca Blight pig scene, which is probably it scared the crap out of me as a kid.
This is pretty early in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And this is not the kind of horror that we've been talking about thus far. Almost every scene we're talking about is about jump scares or grotesque monster designs or body horror. This is just a chilling sequence that's committed by a psychopath.
Yeah, it's
So, do you want to give us an abridged version of the scene? Because this is, and again, I don't want to stress this enough. The game is only a couple hours in at this point.
yeah, it's basically your main party or your main characters witness a village getting attacked, and they can't really do anything to stop it. So you're just kind of left in the aftermath of it. There's survivors are begging for their lives and everything, and the Mad Prince Luca Blight basically says, "Okay, well, just act like a pig." And so the villagers do because they think that maybe that will get them to be saved. And instead, he just cuts them all down and says, like, "Ha ha ha, die, pig." And it's just, it was one of the first scenes I remember thinking, like, wow, humans can be really evil and just messed up in general. That I'd seen in like a really in a video game, that it didn't have any like supernatural elements or anything. It was just really unsettling from the fact that it was just some guy who was kind of playing around with people's lives.
I mean, you're absolutely right. And there are some supernatural parts of Suikoden 2 that eventually get important, but for the most part, Luca Blight is just one powerful human who is committing atrocities uh, uh, and being an absolute terror of a person left and right. And I almost want to skip ahead a little bit, Audra. In the scene where you finally defeat Luca Blight, he sort of becomes a horror movie monster, like a Jason Voorhees or a Michael Myers, because it takes three full parties of your teammates, plus just getting attacked by a barrage of arrows, plus being beset by multiple armies. This man does not die like a normal human should die. And the best comparison I have is like a horror movie villain, and I haven't even seen most of the Friday the 13th movies, but Luca Blight might be the Jason Voorhees of JRPG villains.
Yes. I think what's scary is that he's just so driven by just hate and malice that that just keeps him going like the Energizer Bunny, basically.
Now, have they ever done a horror movie that's a giant Energizer Bunny that just keeps killing and killing and killing and killing?
They should.
That
Yeah.
seems better than the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey thing from a while ago, at least.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of things that are better than that, though.
I didn't see the movie, but I have not heard good things. But do we? I mean, many people have good things to say about Suikoden 2. Lucy or Dom, have you played that one?
No.
No, but I am eyeing the remaster collection. I
Oh
think
yes.
that's coming
Yes,
out in a couple
yes,
months.
coming out in I think spring 2025. Definitely play that. I played both of those games in the last 6 or 7 years, but I will play them again because um a fresh coat of paint and a new translation probably will do them good.
Yes. And I really just thought that was a very unsettling, scary scene, especially when I was, I think, in 8th grade, and I hadn't really
Oh
played that
God.
many RPGs. So I was like, whoa.
Man, I mean, Luca Blight is. We did an entire episode on Luca Blight. That's how unsettling a villain he is. And
Mhm.
no, I'm not kidding. Like, look up RPG villains Luca Blight from like 5-6 years ago, and I think you'll be able to find that one. But Lucy, the other game on your list is one that has not had an issue of being remade or made available to modern audiences. But I think when I was in middle school age, as Audra was in 1998, the same year as Suikoden 2, uh, I think these scared a lot of children as well.
And this is where I have to admit, I didn't play it when it came out on the GameCube. I actually played it
On the
when
N64.
N64. I'm so sorry.
That's fine.
I played it when it came out on the 3DS, and that was my first introduction to it. And of course, at that point, I was burnt out. I was not having the best sleep schedule at the time, and I was playing in this section of Ocarina of Time, uh, probably at 2 a.m., and I get to Castletown in the future, and all the people have been replaced with redeads. And I didn't know what redeads were, and I'm walking around going, what the heck? And of course, I got too close to one, and it grabs you, and you're mashing buttons going, what the heck, what the heck, what the heck? And you get free, and it's just like the town's filled with them, and you don't really have a way of destroying them. You don't have a way of easily getting by them. And particularly when you've just been in Castletown and you go from a really, vibrant, wonderful area to this horror show of almost zombie like creatures, it's not it is not a good thing to one be playing at 2 a.m. and two to really go, oh wow, this is a really terrible, terrible future for Hyrule. And just the fact that they were, there's no explanation for them. There's no just, oh, hey, here's a new monster for you to fight. No, it's like all the people that you have interacted with and had fun with are now these terrible creatures that will suck the life out of you if you get too close, and you're never quite sure what too close is.
The thing about I mean, most Zelda games, including Ocarina of Time, is that when there's an enemy, there's a way to defeat it. Like enemies are targets in these games, and sometimes they're invincible or very hard to kill or meant to be avoided. But rarely do you feel a kind of helplessness that you feel here, because it's the jarring nature of it. Like when you do the time skip into the future as a deliberate choice in like the rough midpoint of Ocarina of Time, you aren't expecting a post-apocalypse.
No.
You're but like you go from the from like the vibrant castle town to an abandoned town full of like Mass Effect 2 husks.
Yeah.
And just the weird haunting moans they make are enough to set you off once you've encountered one for the first time. Because you really do feel powerless, like you're in a survival horror game and no more bullets are left in your gun the first time you encounter those redeads.
And the best you can do is struggle, and that you are having to frantically press those buttons, which sort of heightens your own like anxiousness, and like, oh, there's not anything else I can do. All I can do is mash the button and hope to gosh that I am going to get out of this.
I mean, I did play Ocarina of Time when I was much younger at friends' houses. I never owned an N64, and then I played it on the GameCube many years later in like the late 2000s, maybe right at 2010 or so. And I even knowing about them ahead of time and going in with some expectation, it messed me up a little bit, especially since I mean they're brown and not always easy to see. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's the moan or the shuffling that you hear, and instead of seeing one properly, it's not like, the dogs jumping in front of you in Resident Evil 1, but it is a surprising chunk of horror in the middle of My Legend of Zelda.
Particularly when you realize that they're all standing where the NPCs are standing in Castletown in the past.
Yeah. Now, Lucy, we are talking about The Legend of Zelda a lot in November. We're doing 4 episodes dedicated to Legend of Zelda topics. But we're not talking about Ocarina of Time in those episodes, or at least I don't think we are. We haven't recorded them yet. But Dom or Audra, do you have a similar memory of the redeads in Ocarina of Time? Because, I mean, they bring back redeads later in the series, but they never have quite the same impact.
I have not played it yet, so I don't have much of an impact yet.
Well, it's only one of the best video games of all time from over 25 years ago. It's not going anywhere.
Yep.
Sure. I've not played it myself, but I do remember watching friends play it. and it was like I wasn't really paying attention, but I do remember seeing the readouts come at me like, what happened to this game? With sudden mood shift. But yes, I do remember them being quite creepy, even just watching from the sidelines.
Man, what the hell podcast is this? Most of us have played Mass Effect 2, and only half of us have played Ocarina of Time. It seems a little backwards. The same number of people here have played Shadow Hearts 2 that have played Ocarina of Time. Oh, whatever. I'm not going to say our panels are always perfectly balanced to the to the tastes of the masses. But Dom, I think that the last game on your list is sadly one that only you have played, because my From Software Souls journey is still in its infancy. But the ones of those that I have played have plenty of horror elements in them, and so I'm not familiar with Dark Souls 3, but just
Mm.
from what I know from playing Dark Souls 1 and Bloodborne makes me just absolutely dreading what you're about to tell us about Dark Souls 3.
Oh yeah, so Dark Souls 3 is basically just like a very quick overview of the setting. It is the end of the world, and the flame is fading, and as you're adventuring throughout um Lothric, right, throughout the kingdom to try and restore the flame, there are two really standout monsters for me personally that I remember, or from all my playthroughs, and one of them is the sewer centipedes that you encounter in the city of Irithyll. So Irithyll is actually quite a nice looking city when you first enter it, but there comes a point where you have to go down into the sewers, and there are these monsters called sewer centipedes, and they're basically humanoid centipedes that have hair, that have like the like long black hair dangling in front of their faces, like you would see from like Kayako and Juon, or Sadako from The Ring. And it's just a combination of all the like the horrors you might have, like arachnophobia, like fear, like the weird mutations of like deep sea creatures, and like like when they move around, you can hear all their like legs skittering on the floor as well. It is hair raising stuff, and there's just a pile of them in the sewers, and you have to go through that. And it is honestly, it is like a really shocking moment because Dark Souls 3 to this point, like the enemy designs, they are lean towards being like grim dark and very horror, like a bit horror-ish themes for some of them,
So
but they
there are
still,
skeletons and monsters, but
yeah,
nothing quite like this.
yeah. But this is like the first straight up like, oh my god, this is like actual. I mean, we said this a lot this podcast, but this is body horror, and it was quite shocking to see. And um, another one is later on. So you enter the profane capital, and there are these monsters called the monstrosity of sin, and these are basically like giant humanoid, the bodies kind of look like hippos, but like they still have like distinctly like human limbs, and the face is a giant hand that is covered in teeth, and
Ugh.
there's like a maw in the middle, and inside the maw is like it's lined with eyes pretty much, and you can see some of the eyes like sticking out of the belly as well, and um it is also another like really frankly terrifying moment because the profane capital is um also like not really, like there are some like masked mages here, and there's like some gargoyles that you fight, but then it hits you with this like, what, this like eldritch monstrosity out of nowhere. And I think these um designs really stand out because it shows how in like the ending of the world, like the flame that is waning, it shows how even like the average humans, because these are all supposed to be like average humans who have been mutated by like the waning of the flame, or in the case of like the monstrosities, they were tampering with the flame somehow, and the flame ended up mutating them. And it's these two monsters really stand out in Dark Souls because I feel they are such like a grotesque representation of what happens to the average person in this world.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
Dom, that was all a lot to take in.
Yeah.
Now I know a bit about Dark Souls 3, and in case Lucy or Audra or a listener is unaware, the like Dark Souls 1 is sort of about restoring the flame that sort of keeps the world full of light and warmth. And at the end, you can choose to either sacrifice yourself to restore the flame, or let the flame go out and let sort of darkness take over and see what happens. That's kind of like the big choice you make at the end of Dark Souls 1. And I believe
Mhm.
Dark Souls 3 is the setting of Dark Souls 1, but the flame has sort of gone out and been relit multiple times, and now it's the world is barely hanging on to the last bit of flame and has become a twisted dark version of a game that
Mhm.
was already a twisted and dark setting. So it's like, and I'm assuming that those sewer depths are sort of the sewers before Blighttown, and maybe the capital is like is the undead burg or something from Dark Souls 1. I could be, or maybe it's Anor Londo from Dark Souls 1.
It's not quite. Yeah, well, it does lead to Anor Londo, and like it's not quite as in depth as Blighttown, but yeah, it is definitely like a very murky sewer section.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sewer in between the undead burg and Blighttown, so I sort of
Yeah,
yeah, so
yeah.
that's what I figured. But the
Mhm.
way you were describing those centipedes from around the like you said, like the hair similar to Sadako from The Ring, and then you just kept adding details and details. And this is an audio only medium, but my head was shaking, and then it was shaking in bigger and bigger arcs with every new descriptor you brought on. That sounds like something I never want to Google image search. Uh,
Oh
um
yeah.
and
Same.
and when you said human centipede at the beginning, I was worried you were going to go another direction. But that's still,
Oh,
but this is still just, oh man, I maybe I should just skip ahead to Elden Ring instead of playing Dark Souls 3. I don't know if I want to handle that. But there's probably some twisted nonsense in Elden Ring as well. So there's no winning with this series except that they're excellent and I want to play all of them.
Yeah, and I think like it's because like these moments are really like sparse throughout the game that they just stand out so much more because I can't really think of other enemy types that were really as grotesque as these two throughout the entire game.
Yeah, because it's a lot of like knights in armor and
Hmm.
skeletons and more conventional monsters in most of
Hmm.
Dark Souls. Then they throw something like this at you, and you're absolutely just having a panic attack manifesting on the screen, trying to deal with it. Oh man,
Yeah,
God,
that
sewers.
was my exact reaction in my first
Like I
playthrough.
mean, I mean, your list here on our document just says sewer centipedes and monstrosity of sin, and it. I didn't know what my expectations were, but they ended up maybe worse than my nightmares. So thank you for that, Dom.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Now, Lucy and Audra, I think we've mentioned this another, or you've mentioned to me off air before. Neither of you are Dark Souls players, but does this make you closer or further away from playing Dark Souls 3?
I have to admit, I've got a friend who has been trying to convince me to play Dark Souls with them, and I'm not sure.
No.
yeah, I'm on the fence on that one. it's They're intimidating to me a bit, and Dark Souls 3 might be a little too intimidating at first. Description alone.
I think of Dark Souls 1 as being like almost a modern version of a Castlevania game because it's this sort of gothic tinged action game in a huge interconnected setting. But this feels like it moves away from like gothic movie horror into just gothic terror. And I
Mhm.
don't and I mean, monstrosity of sin, you're the like, again, every phrase that you kept adding on, Dom, just made me recoil more and more. It's like they're hippo sized, but their heads are hands with teeth and eyes inside the mouths, and I'm just sitting here going, nope, nope, nope.
Yeah, I think
Oh
Miyazaki
boy.
was hot off of developing Bloodborne when he made these monsters. So
Yeah, he's like, hey man, I still have 2/3 of a notebook full of stuff that couldn't make it into Bloodborne.
yeah,
And that
exactly.
game has like a terrifying void spider dream sequence in it. So yeah, here let's go. Oh boy.
Just the skittering alone of the centipede would probably have me being like, nope.
Yeah, of all the verbs you went with, you chose skittering. So again, thank you for that, Dom.
We try.
Ah, man, I know one of the most common phobias is arachnophobia, and just the sound of a spider skittering is enough to just make your flesh crawl. And I'm sorry, listeners, if I accidentally triggered anyone with that. But so yeah, those are eight horror parts of mostly non-horror games that have affected us in deep ways. And for me, I mean, my two were one from 25 years ago and one from 2 hours 5 minutes ago. um but we pretty much ran the gamut of the 90s to the present day on these episodes. But I know I had us limited to two choices each. Were there any other RPG moments, just as in a sort of lightning round, that you almost brought to the table today instead of what we actually discussed?
Yeah, one of the things that I thought about was from one of the most recent Legend of Zelda games, Tears of the Kingdom, the Malice Hands. When you first run into those guys, and the music changes, and suddenly you've got a monster that is crawling after you faster than you can run. Yeah, those were not a fun enemy to find.
One for me that I didn't bring because I don't think this is a game we cover, but I've mentioned Castlevania already. One of the least scary Metroid games is probably Metroid Fusion for the Game Boy Advance. Again, an excellent Game Boy Advance game. But there's a basically a virus or a bacteria or something that takes over your armor. And so you end up sort of creating new armor to get through Metroid Fusion. But the alien virus version of your old armor sort of stalks around the ship hunting you. And there are sequences where you have to like freeze or stun or escape your own armor, like possessed armor chasing you, that even though it's on a tiny Game Boy Advance screen and otherwise part of a fairly colorful bright game, are just, I was amazed at how much sheer terror I got out of a Game Boy Advance game from 2003 or something.
For me, mine was in Muv-Luv Alternative, which is a visual novel. There was a really shocking moment where um, this is like a really clear defining point where the story switches. Where so you're up to this point, it's kind of like a pretty standard action visual novel with lots of sequences and like people die and stuff, but it's all off screen. But then your mentor gets their head chopped off by an alien, and the reveal is so shocking because at first you just see like the blood running down the front of their uniform, so you think that's going to be it. That's going to be the end of it, but then the camera pans up to her head, which has been bitten like cleanly in half. And that was like a real shocking moment for me as well, because like Marvel Alternative to this point was it was dark and it was serious, but it wasn't gory. Or it, and I feel like that at that moment really like the reality of the setting really hit me. And um that point also really starts the entire like rest of the story as well. And I think that yeah, that was like a really defining moment. And it's still like referenced so often within the visual novel community as well. Just call it the chomp moment. And yeah, I think that goes to show how shocking it was for other readers as well.
Surprise decapitations. Alrighty.
Oh.
This episode is going to do great on the analytics.
I was just thinking of the scenes from Omori when you have to go to when you visit the bathroom every time you wake
Oh,
up, and it's like the screen, it'll show you what's in the mirror, and every once in a while you'll get just one image that's like, nope.
yeah, Audra, you and I were on two episodes dedicated to Omori earlier this year, and that game has some
Oh yeah.
definite horror imagery in it that is too much of a spoiler to talk about right now.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, listeners, maybe play that game and listen to those episodes if you want to have an idea of what we're hinting at, because that game is something else.
Yes.
But listeners, I hope you enjoyed listening to this Halloween flavored podcast that we're recording over a week before Halloween. But all four of us have some Halloween planning and decorating to do, so I think we're near the end of the episode. First of all, thank you so much, Dom, Lucy, and Audra, for joining me on this sort of planned at the last minute episode of Retro Encounter that we almost recorded like 4 years ago, but had to cancel mysteriously, and then revive like it was Night of the Living Dead. So thank you for joining me on this zombified episode of Retro Encounter, and thank you listeners for joining us on this zombified episode of Retro Encounter. There it is again. And speaking of zombies and redeads, we are doing a couple Zelda episodes in a row during the month of November. We quite a while ago we picked The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past to be our 2-episode game for November, and then we were planning the rest of the month. We just had a bunch of Zelda ideas and decided to make it a mini Zelda month for the first time on Retro Encounter since 2018. So next week we are doing a Legend of Zelda fantasy draft episode. And I do not know how that thing's gonna go, except that I'm certain something is gonna make me upset, and I'm probably gonna blame Hillary for it. And then
How could you?
I can't stay mad at her, but I know she's gonna ruin my plans somehow. She is just so diabolical. But after that episode, we're doing an episode all about The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom, that September new release in the Legend of Zelda series that is pretty unique and exciting for a Legend of Zelda game that is sort of bringing Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom concepts into a 2D Zelda format. And maybe that's a hint on what I want to talk about when we record that episode. But I'm really excited to talk about that one because Echoes of Wisdom is a really, really great game. And I had to, and it was good enough for me to tear myself away from Metaphor Fantasio to finish it a little while ago. But so that's the following month. And you know what? I think I'm gonna give everyone a bit of a Halloween treat. The final game journal of 2024 is going to be 2 episodes on Dragon Quest 3. That is a couple weeks or maybe a month or so after its remake comes out. So I think it's going to be a bunch of panelists playing the Dragon Quest 3 remake and then talking about Dragon Quest 3 in December. So please look forward to a whole bunch of Zelda, including a fantasy draft, A Link to the Past, and Echoes of Wisdom, and then some Dragon Quest 3 the following month. But listeners, if you want to email us about body horror, psychological horror, human centipede, or Dragon Quest, or whatever you prefer, the best way to reach us is to email retro@rpgfan.com. You can also follow RPGFan on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, or on our Discord, always either called RPGFan or RPGFancom. And on the RPGFan.com website proper, you can also find reviews, features, podcasts, and all kind and news, all kinds of RPG stuff posted every day. But in addition to Retro Encounter, there are 2 other podcasts hosted by the RPG Fan Podcast Network. There's every other Monday, Random Encounter about randomness and what games are playing, and every other Monday, Rhythm Encounter about RPG music. You can listen to and subscribe to Random, Rhythm, and Retro Encounters on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube or however you choose to listen to podcasts. And please give us feedback, especially if that feedback is 5 stars out of 5. But if you want to give us feedback, I guess as panelists and not as a website, I always feel so strange when I say that. I guess I've said it so many times it becomes second nature at this point. But if you want to find us on social media, let's tell the listeners how to do so. Starting with you, Lucy.
You can find me as Jess Idris, JESIDRES, on most social media platforms, Tumblr and Blue Sky in particular.
But now, Audra, how can listeners find you?
You can find me at email at audrab@rpgfan.com.
Now, Dom, your turn.
You can find me as DH Canny on the RPG Fan Discord.
And listeners, I'm not that hard to find on the internet. You can find me either on Instagram, Blue Sky, or RPG Fans Discord. On all 3 places, I am at Evoker for Dogs. What do I do for an ending here?
I can give another evil laugh.
No. Yeah.
That's already a little played out. What's something? What's something that would be funny to hear in like a creepy demon voice?
Rate, review, and subscribe.
All right, let's see. All right, let's try that.
Listeners, rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you. Good night and good luck.